The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Foundation podcast with Andy Duncan, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello and welcome to this Gold Money podcast from Auburn, Alabama. We're here at the eve of the Austrian Economics Research Conference, and this evening I'm with Michael McKay, who is the founder and host of Radio Free Market, a radio program which attracts more than 10,000 listeners around the world. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Andy.
Now, before we discuss this conference, we've both been following the Cyprus story recently, along with your economist colleagues, Patrick Barron and Yuri Maltsev. What do you think of the situation in Cyprus?
Well, as we know, at this particular moment, it's a pretty fluid situation. But what is most important for everyone to really notice is that it is bringing to the fore the concept of property as being key in importance in our conversation, in all of our conversations. You know, in the United States, there's an old story that you don't become a libertarian until you're mugged by the government.
Uh-huh.
And what's happening to the entire world is that they're realizing that we all are on the verge of being mugged by our governments because they're willing to actually seriously talk about taking the money directly out of our bank accounts in order to handle the malfeasance and idiot kinds of constructs that they've been operating under.
Yeah. One of the strange things about the euro is that is the whole song and dance about bringing it in was that it would make everyone's lives better. That was the whole point about bringing it in. And yet it seems to have been that now we all have to sacrifice our lives to save the euro. Haven't the EU got that the wrong way round?
Well, you know, in terms of economic theory, it's true that a money that is more pervasive has the broader purchasing power. That was really the concept that everybody kind of got a hold of. What they ignored is that that money should be voluntary. And because that money was made to be fiat, was made to be forced money, as Guido Holzmann calls it, then they had to make it work. And in order to make it work, they had to impose various different structures on everyone.
Yeah. So what they tried to create was a kind of fake kind of gold standard. In fact, at the time when the euro was being brought in, people I was speaking to were saying, yes, but isn't this like gold because it's a universal money? The difference between the paper money, though, which can be printed at will by the monetary authorities, and gold is supplied by a supply and demand curve. Now, if you...
And I would like to interject there, that's voluntary as opposed to forced money. There's a very unfortunate essay by an extraordinarily brilliant economist, Jesus de Soto, that basically presents the euro as a sort of gold standard. And I know of many Austrian economists that were very hesitant to criticize this. I'm not so hesitant. It was unfortunate because he ignored one very fundamental construct, and that is that the euro was not a voluntary money that was created based on market. It was based on legislation. It was based on government conspiring to try to create central control.
Now, as we speak, the Cypriot government haven't actually had their vote, which they've been putting off for several days while they've been trying to figure out how much they can get away with in Cyprus. But if you had €1 million in, say, Spain or Italy or Portugal or somewhere, what would you do with it right now?
Well, there's a wonderful website. One is called goldmoney.com. and
I didn't pay him to say that, but keep going.
There's another one that I'm very fond of. It's called eurovigilante.com. And both of these websites offer these kinds of products that people can actually go to where they can actually try to protect their funds, protect their property. People have to recognize money is property. Money is that aspect of property that is the most usable kind of property. And it is that kind of property that is what we take with us I mean, it's not allegorical to look at the refugees of old who sewed diamonds into their clothes or put it into their bodies in certain ways. They were trying to take their money, they were trying to take their property with them. And in the same way, we are very close to that same kind of situation. People need mobility of their money.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, that idea of money and mobility is becoming very, very important to people.
So the thing with gold money is, of course, they have vaults in Singapore and Hong Kong and several other places around the world, which are outside the jurisdiction of the Eurozone. It seems very odd that most governments milk their kind of citizens. But we've seen in the Cyprus story, we've seen governments try to turn their citizens into beef cows, in the phrase of Doug Casey, rather than milk cows. Right. Do you think some people have likened the Cypriot situation to the First World War kind of trigger, that it will be a kind of a huge kind of watershed moment in financial history? Do you kind of agree with that view, or do you think it's a smaller thing than that?
I believe that the Cypriot event is that watershed moment. However, whether it will have the same kind of impact as Sarajevo in for World War I remains to be seen. I think people who are paying attention will notice that their property is at jeopardy in a way that they haven't thought of before.
Yeah. So how do you think it's going to spread out then? Are the Russians going to just stop putting money into Cyprus and Europe and start buying lots and lots of gold? Is the euro going to collapse? What do you think the immediate repercussions will be of this?
Well, it's hard to say, but if I was going to bet, what I would basically believe is going to happen is that the Russians are going to pressure Washington into pressuring the International Monetary Fund, which, by the way, is in Washington, and I think they're doing that today in a different kind of way by, in some way, discrediting the president, Lagarde, by sending the police to look into her apartment. It's interesting. It seems like that particular role of being president of the International Monetary Fund is very dangerous, because the last one was brought into question due to questionable relations.
Also in the United States.
Yes,
as well.
And it's quite interesting that this is happening. But all that aside, I think the Russians are going to pressure the United States, i.e., the International Monetary Fund, to back down. And I think that Cyprus is going to more likely become a footnote to our activity. They're going to look for other ways that they can take our money. I would be afraid of them next trying to go directly for retirement monies, 401ks, IRAs in the United States, where they will force everyone into government bonds of some kind or another.
Now, that's enough probably on the Cyprus story, especially as we haven't had the vote, so we don't know the end as we speak in this interview.
Yeah, it's very
now, we're both here in Auburn, Alabama, looking forward to hopefully what will be a fantastic conference starting tomorrow morning. Now, it's just renamed itself. It used to be called the Austrian Scholars Conference. Now it's the Austrian Economics Research Conference. What are you looking forward to at the conference?
Well, I think there's always a number of papers that are interesting. I think that the greatest value of anyone coming to this conference is the opportunity to sit with individuals who are truly on a world-class level of understanding what I like to call reality economics. And the likes of Hans Hermann Hoppe, David Gordon, Thorsten Polet, Doug French, even, yourself.
I'll just be a gadfly sitting around at the back. Okay, so are there any speeches in particular that you're really looking forward to?
I'll be looking forward to Hans's lecture, Thorsten's lecture in particular.
Yeah, and what's Professor Hoppe going to be speaking about?
He'll be talking about his book, The Great Fiction, and that book is a collection of a number of his essays. Some have been published in other books, but I would heartily recommend that book, and I heartily recommend his works in particular.
Now, with Professor Polite, his great thing is that there will be a hyperinflation.
Right.
But you believe that there will be some resilience for the dollar over the next couple of years. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I actually note that there is a lot of inertia in the world, and there's one point that we really have to take into consideration, and that is that this is the first time in history where there was no place in the world where there was a really good alternative to fiat money. Any other hyperinflation that's ever occurred, even in Zimbabwe, they used the US dollar. And so I think that hyperinflations definitely can happen and more likely will happen. So I don't disagree with any of those people like Professor Polite that state categorically that they will happen. But I wonder how long it may take. So, for example, this new conference has been announced in China in September to, again, talk about a one world money, a global money, through their particular meeting, is just another way to kick the can down the road again. And that means what? It means maybe another 10, 20, 30 years of fiat money in another kind of form. Yeah. And so I believe we're in a relative ugliness contest at the moment, and the US dollar is winning, meaning that it is the least ugly at the moment, but that will come to an end at some point.
I'm not sure that global currency will give us 20, 30 years. I think when we had many fiat currencies, it survived well because they could compete with each other for being the least ugly. But once the EU managed to destroy the Deutschmark and turn it into the euro, and once the Swiss franc, the central bank in Switzerland, said that it would start pegging to the euro, we lost two major kind of blocks to that.
I think that's a very, very insightful thought, because the interesting thing is that what is actually helping fiat money work is the number of them that exist. If they were to localize it to one Austrian business cycle would be enough to destroy the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. I mean, you see with the euro was brought in again to be this kind of paper gold. It was also brought in for stability. Mm-hmm. And yet we've seen with the euro, we've seen tremendous instability. Absolutely. So if we have a global paper money, whatever you call it, the bank or whatever you call it, we'll basically be locked inside a world Soviet Union with the Soviet Union ruble, mm-hmm. which will be a completely useless kind of money, and the real money will become bottles of vodka and whatever else.
The real value of all this conversation that we're having right now is to try to get people to learn where to go to, because what is really evident is that we're pretty clear that we need to get away from the kind of architecture that we're seeing right now. And those that will study Austrian economics, those that will learn from the basic works of Murray Rothbard, like What Has Government Done to Our Money, The Mystery of Banking, Human Action, these works are so vitally important for people to read and understand right now, so that they have an opportunity to perhaps learn where to go in the future.
Yeah,
that's really what we need to be focusing on. Where are we going to go?
And let's hope, for my case anyway, that that's going to be a gold money. Anyway, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Michael McKay. My great pleasure.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.